Welcome back everyone to another Comparisons Ball review where today we're going to be comparing the new Storm Summit Peak to a bunch of other Storm and 900 Global Bowling Balls. We have a straight female and a higher rev male, so you have multiple perspectives on this bowling ball, and we're going to be including some Specto data. Due to the huge success that we had with our perception versus reality video, thanks to you guys, thanks so much for watching, we're going to start incorporating that and my analysis into every Comparisons Ball review. So let's go check out these bowling balls, the Summit Peak, as well as these other bowling balls, and I'll meet you at the end so we can dive deep into the Specto data.
All right, Katie Hurley here, up-and-coming female star, throws it great. Here with us today to test the Summit Peak.
Yes.
Did you have a Summit before?
No, I have not tried the Summit.
So first time in the Summit line. Well, let's see you get lined up and see what you think.
All right, sounds good. That was a pretty good shot. Could have been a little bit in, a little bit left off my hand, but that was a pretty good shot. I'm gonna give it a board right, to see what kind of motion I can get out of it from there.
So Katie, you like the Absolute a lot, so you at least get to compare to shiny ball to shiny ball today,
yeah.
But you haven't been able to throw the Absolute down the lane yet, so it's hard to know how it compares, but what are your first thoughts on the Summit Peak?
I really like it so far. I think it's giving a pretty similar shape that the Absolute would give. It's a little smoother, has a little bit of that hold. I feel like the Absolute just kind of keeps driving, whereas the Summit Peak just kind of has a point where it stops a little bit. So really liking the ball motion that I'm seeing so far.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
I'm going to try the Absolute. I'm going to stand in the same spot just to get a good reaction, see what it does.
So Katie, this is the house that you throw the Absolute the most in, right?
Yes.
You love that ball here. How does the Summit Peak compare?
Yeah, so I think the Summit Peak gives me a little bit different of a shape. I feel like I am a little bit more able to keep that parallel, keep it in front of me. Could probably keep the ball in play longer because the Absolute is a little bit stronger. So I feel like the Summit Peak is going to give me that nice, smooth, readable motion. And I feel like it's going to be super versatile here. I can use it at the beginning of league and towards the end of the night too. So I'm really seeing the versatility come out.
Okay, great. And then what are we comparing to next?
We're going to compare it to the IQ Ruby.
Okay, great.
For the IQ Ruby, I'm going to stand in the same spot, see what it gives. It is a little bit weaker, but the lanes are pretty crispy, so we're going to see.
So quite a few shots there with the IQ Ruby. Thoughts on that compared to the Absolute and the Summit Peak?
Yeah, so the Ruby is a little bit weaker. Gives me good down lane motion, can kind of cut through some of that oil. I use it typically towards the end of the day, so for league, third game or towards the end of the block. What I like about the Absolute and the Summit Peak compared to that, they're a little bit stronger. So I prefer a little bit of a stronger ball, but I like having a weak ball to kind of fall back on. So yeah, it is a little bit weaker. It's still pretty smooth, drives pretty well. Compared to the Absolute drives probably the longest out of all three. The Summit Peak is right in the middle of those. So I would put it right smack dab in the middle.
Okay, cool. All right, Katie, so what's your final review of the Summit Peak, and how do you think you're going to be using it compared to the other bowling balls?
I would give the Summit Peak a nuts rating. I absolutely love it. I love the ball motion. I love the shape. I'd probably use it on a house shot here at Lakeview for league, but I think it could be pretty versatile too during tournament play. When the lanes get kind of squirrely or dry, I think it can really cut through that and still give a nice, predictable, controllable motion.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thanks.
Sweet.
Ryan Riley's back to test out the new Summit Peak. Does it smell good?
Smells. If it rolls as good as it smells, we're gonna be good.
Sounds good. Well, let's take a look and get lined up. So Ryan, thoughts so far on the Summit Peak? What are you thinking?
For a shiny ball, it's actually smoother than I thought it was going to be. It's pretty clean. It still revs up pretty good, but a lot smoother off the spot.
Okay.
Carries a 9-pin bonus, so.
Okay, cool. So Ryan, you've thrown the Absolute, some other shiny symmetrical and asymmetrical balls. Do you feel like the Summit Peak is pretty unique, or do you feel like it's pretty close to something you've thrown in the past?
To me, it's kind of unique. It's like I said, it's clean, but yet it still revs up and it's kind of smooth off of it for a symmetrical pearl. So something a little different.
Okay, cool. What are we going to compare to next?
Now I'll probably compare it to the Summit just to see same core, different covers.
All right, sounds good. Over.
All right, so going to the Summit, I'm gonna go ahead and already move my feet about 5 right. I'm gonna try to look, I don't know, 18-ish. See what happens.
Okay, Ryan, so we got 5 shots or so on that Summit, right?
Yep.
And first thoughts on what you think the difference are between that and the Summit Peak?
Well, besides the layout difference, the Summit's just so much earlier and smoother overall. So it just gets into a roll much sooner. So the only way I can make it close is try to get my hand around it to get it to clear the front. But I think they complement each other pretty well. As soon as you get far enough left with the Summit, it's early and puking, just go to the Summit Peak on top of it. Should be pretty good.
Okay, great. What are we going to compare it to next?
Now I'm going to compare it to the Sublime.
Okay, great. So what's your final review of the Summit Peak, and when do you think you're going to use it? Who would you recommend it for, and all of that?
Summit Peak, I'm going to give it a 5. I'm probably going to use it a lot more in league, just on the higher friction surfaces we bowl on, it's so much cleaner. Pretty smooth for a shiny ball. think it's going to be pretty much a good benchmark ball for everybody, just because of how clean and how much it revs up. So, yeah, okay, perfect. Thanks, man. Yeah.
So that's what the players think. What does the Specto data say? Let's start off with our straighter player, Katie. When you're dealing with straighter players, you're not going to really want to look at change of direction a lot. Because they don't generate a lot of rev rate and they're typically kind of speed dominant, you're not going to see a big change of direction difference between all the balls, which we can see here at only a 0.3 difference between the 3 bowling balls in terms of total change of direction. However, where you do want to see it is in speed loss. Speed loss is going to be critical because they're kind of a speed dominant player, which is what makes them a straighter player. In this case, we see exactly what Katie was seeing on the lanes, which is the absolute slows down the most in the back part of the lane at 3.9, Summit Peak next at 3.8, and IQ Ruby at 3.6. What does it mean that they slow down the most in the back part of the lane? Well, that means they're going to be creating the most amount of direction, change of direction, when they're slowing down more. And you can see this as well in the heads and the mids data for the IQ Ruby, where it's slowing down the most in the front and middle part of the lane, which means that it's losing that axis rotation, that side roll. So by the time it gets to the end of the pattern, the back part of the lane, it's not going to slow down as much because it's already rolling forward, which is going to create a smoother motion, which is what Katie saw. Now in Ryan's case, we want to look at change of direction metrics a lot more than the others, because as you can see in speed loss and impact angle, the balls look a lot more similar. In the change of direction category, you can see that the Sublime definitely changed the direction the most, especially in the back part of the lane. The reason this is a lot to do with the layout as well as the bowling ball itself. But Specto can really give you an insight here that's a little bit more interesting with the Summit Peak and the Summit, because what you'll notice is the total hook is quite similar, even the impact angle is quite similar, and the speed loss is quite similar. And this is really because Specto isn't really telling you that he was in a completely different part of the lane. And obviously if he's in a completely different part of the lane, it's going to impact how the ball reacts, but the change of direction can tell you that, because as he gets further right into the dry, the ball is going to change direction a lot more in the front part of the lane, not as much in the back part of the lane. And you can really see that in the change of direction metrics, where you can see exactly what Ryan saw on the lanes and what he communicated to us, which is that the Summit is much earlier, not as much change of direction. As it starts to get lazy, you can go to that Summit Peak, and then for him, especially because of the layout differences between his Summit Peak and his Sublime, he can go to his Sublime after. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like us to do this type of review on a different bowling ball, let us know down below what bowling ball you'd like us to do it on. If you like anything bowling, please subscribe to our channel, and as always, thanks for watching.